a real eye-opening experience for people to understand the value of leadership. And the abysmal national approach is why America is in the situation that we're in. We're looking at a scenario right now where this is not about health. It's about whether you are voting for a Democrat or voting for a Republican. And that disparity is trickling down into the communities where people aren't taking it seriously enough. Yet 137,000 plus people have been killed in a matter of 3 months, with this pandemic. And we still aren't taking it seriously. I mean, you see what happened in Atlanta with Governor Kemp, or Georgia, my apologies, with Governor Kemp, basically saying, overruling the individual mayors who said, we're going to mandate mask use. He said, no, you can't do that, which allows it to be this tug of war where people think it's their First Amendment right not to wear a mask. It is just outrageous. It's outrageous.
It is. It's so outrageous. And I don't understand what's the proof. What are they proving? Let's just try the mask.
I mean the fact that it can save somebody's life. I mean, the fact that it's something that's simple.
Y'all provoke me with this conversation, and I'm trying to hold back.
Okay, it's 6 o'clock.
No, it's okay. I'm recording. I hit record as soon as I went ahead and hit record because I know how it go. So you can go ahead, and then as people come in, we can do.
Yeah, we'll just go. So, all right, guys, I want to welcome you to Black Box Radio. I'm Queen, and this is After COVID, After Protest, Existing as Black Lives That Matter, the men's version, men, talking about what's going on in the world. We just finished talking about COVID.
We haven't finished talking about COVID.
So
it's recording.
We didn't finish, but we put it on pause. So I just want you guys we're going to introduce yourselves, and then we're going to move into the conversation. Okay, so I'm Queen from Black Box. Brother TJ?
I'm TJ Smith. Last I was a former mayoral candidate, but I've been, public spokesperson for a couple of different places the last few years, but just really trying to advocate for what's best for our city and to pull our folks out of some of the situations that we found ourselves in through no fault of some people's own. Just advocating for a better Baltimore.
Got it. Ray?
I'm Ray Kelly. I'm a community advocate from West Baltimore. I'm the director of an organization called the Citizens Policing Project, and I'm also the lead community liaison for the monitoring team, overseeing the implementation of Baltimore's consent decree.
All right, and our doctor tonight.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Cleo Monago. I run the Amasi Center for Black Wellness and Culture in the Charles Village area of Baltimore. I am a behavioral health analyst and a researcher, and all that stuff is really a bunch of different ways of saying activist for Black life, because that's really my focus, trying to do what I can to get Black people to come out of what I call the white supremacy trauma trance.
All right. The WTT, the white supremacy, WSTT.
Something like that.
White supremacy trauma trance. All right.
Well, I mean, since I'm on camera right now, I might not be the whole time, but since I'm up here, I just want to cheers to TJ. We in the same boat right now. I got some red. I got some dark. He got some light.
I got some water.
Got some water.
What you got?
I have that too.
Okay, sip it if you got it.
Everybody's sipping.
Yeah, I'm G. I'm a producer. I'll be kind of in the background, helping to manage folks coming in and chiming in on the conversation when I just can't help it. So I appreciate each and every one of you. Those of you I met before. Ray, I think this is our first time meeting, and I'm excited to hear what everyone has to share this evening.
Thanks for having me.
Let's move right into the conversation. We were kind of discussing COVID, but we're going to move on from that right now, because this was after COVID, after protests, and still existing in Baltimore City. And with the chaos and the violence, but it's such a beautiful city. So I wanted to have this conversation with the men and kind of see what you guys' role in this rebuild, because after we get past all the ills of society right now, I don't know, racism is not going anywhere. So we're gonna have to really work on racism. COVID, looks like we got to work on that also to get past that. But as Black people ascend and use the leverage, I think, that we have at this moment, what's next for the males, for Black men in the community? Who wants to jump in first?
So I think right now in community, our role is just to try to maintain a source of stability. So in a community like mine in Sandtown or in Upton, where the impact isn't really what the media portrays, because this struggle for those residents was already hard to make it. And now we bring in COVID and stay-at-home orders and businesses closing, the direct impact is still ongoing. So our goal now is to just make sure that we're providing as much as we can for a stable source of sustainability.
And I look at this like I feel like we were late on the education of how this disease would disproportionately impact Black people in inner city America, let alone Baltimore, with what we already know with the health disparities that already exist. We know the asthmatics. I was born and raised here, and I had asthma as a child. And that's one of the other impacts of COVID that we're talking about as we look at putting kids back in school, understanding that there is a health disparity that already exists, that we know exists. So we're putting them in a potential petri dish if we were to put them back in school, knowing that the rate of respiratory illness is higher in the city of Baltimore than in the suburbs. So it's things like that that already existed, and then you introduce this into it. And I don't know that in March we did a good enough job making sure people knew this. And it wasn't until sometime in early to mid-April, I think the NAACP ended up getting a truck out, going into communities and educating communities of color and low-income communities that, hey, this can affect you just as much as it affects anyone else. As a matter of fact, it's going to affect you more than it affects anyone else. And I think those ramifications are something that we have to continue to let people know. I mean, as Ray mentioned not long ago, he's still out on Pennsylvania Avenue letting everybody know you need to wear a mask. And that's important. And I see a lot of pictures and everything else on social media, and I'm trying to think, is that like recent? Or are y'all like gathering like 50 people right now today still, when we know? And we can't take for granted people know. So we have to really continue the messaging around it.
I'm not sure my perspective is male specific. I'm a male, and so the source of my perspective will be that of a male. But I think it's something that we all should think about. I remember when this first, when the COVID-19 issue first was being talked about, and the CDC recommended that we wear a mask. Where I understand how respiratory viruses that get around through spittle, through breathing, through making contact with viruses based on people's body fluids from the mouth, getting places they don't know that's there. I know how that works. And when I first heard 10 people to a room, I was like, oh no, I'm gonna wear a mask even if it's one. And then when they went to 10 and 20 and 30, I'm like, somebody don't understand respiratory viruses, because 2 is enough. I mean, I wrote an article about it, and I said, y'all need to look at this like getting pregnant. You don't need to have a whole lot of sex to get pregnant. Once is enough.
Yeah.
And I remember I was walking down the street by my office 3 months ago, and it was even worse. I mean, I had a whole head wrap on that went around my face and everything. Now I just wear this. I mean, I kind of calmed down a little bit. This is the mouth. Everything was wrapped up. And this sister and her kids are looking at me, and they were laughing at me. About maybe 4 days later, all of them had on masks, in their little masks. Said, funny, huh? You know, and we kind of laughed about laughing at me and how everybody was doing the same thing. But I think one of the things that we're dealing with regarding this mask issue is it's difficult sometimes for people, in this instance, Black people, to make changes that are going to make them more uncomfortable. Because a lot of Black people, and these are not conscious perspective, these are unconscious phenomena. A lot of Black people feel a sense of uncomfortability just being alive, and they use breathing, sometimes smoking a cigarette, sometimes drugs, food, sometimes alcohol, whatever, to feel better. And they don't want that attempt to feel better to be interrupted. And now you're saying I got to stay away from people and wear a mask? Well, there's some of us, again, this is unconscious, are resistant to that kind of restriction. And just because you make a recommendation to wear a mask and it's a good idea, if you don't deal with it with consideration for those unconscious issues, you may not be that successful, particularly with getting people to be consistent regarding the use of masks, because there's resistance to using the mask. And it's not because something's wrong with them, it's because a lot of us live in a state of resistance to this society. You know, this is the things that our family members and parents give us permission to talk about, but we feel it. And we need to look at Black people in terms of getting Black people to understand the importance of self-preservation by talking about the importance of self-preservation as part of the narrative that we're using to get them to wear masks, because some of us don't value self-preservation. We value joy or feeling better about things, even if it's temporary, over a long-term discomfort. Am I making sense?
Yeah, you're making sense. Making sense. You're saying that people are really in a psychosis and they don't want anything else to make them feel any worse, so they resist.
Yeah, I didn't want to use the word psychosis.
Well, I think we have some unresolved trauma in our community, and with that trauma, and COVID-19 has actually introduced more trauma and introduced a killer amongst us. And I want to know the adjustments, particularly that men are going to make in the community per se, when it comes to after this protest and in Baltimore City. How can we address the ills, realign, and use some of the leverage that we have at the moment and move Baltimore forward? That's what I'm trying to hear from the men.
Well, I'll say real quickly that men in particular should be talking about all this stuff. Because I think we all know by now, for example, that COVID affects us men more than women, more than everyone. And there are pre-existing conditions that are unique to men in terms of disproportion, like heart disease, like cardiovascular care challenges, and unresolved trauma that keep us at a high risk factor when it comes to COVID. But I'll close my comments so I won't dominate this space by saying that one thing that we have to do more is work together. That must sound like a cliche, but it's true. We have a lot of silos going on, and silos perpetuate the expectation that we're fragmented, not unified, don't get along, and can't work together. And no matter how great we are by ourselves, anytime you got to work by yourself, you're at a weakness. We need teams.
Okay.
I think that's the key, the what's next. Because if we allow the moment to pass, then we wait for the next one to arise. And I think if we look at just using COVID as the example, the bigger question and thing behind that is, what do we do in communities to ensure that another generation isn't raised with a disproportionate amount of pre-existing conditions? And they exist because of environmental issues. So what are we really doing to work on those long-term issues beyond just talking about the here and now of education? And then 20 years from now, we have another pandemic or another disease that presents itself, that introduces itself, that preys on people with disproportionate health conditions. So it's the long game that we have to prepare for. Where is the oomph behind that? Where's the action that's going to take place to pull people out of the environmental health disparities that they exist in now? That in my opinion, is specific to COVID. what we have to really use this moment for, because that's an atrocity in and of itself, because it will happen again. And as the doctor was saying, some of these things might be hereditary, but a lot of them are also environmental, and those are what we should be working on.
Okay. We have Adam Jackson who joined us. Adam, introduce yourself, and then I'm going to tell you what we were last. Did you hear the last question? But just introduce yourself, and then I'll tell you what we're talking about.
Sure. Peace and blessings, Big Sis. Good to see you. I appreciate the invitation. Adam Jackson, Leaders of a Beautiful Struggle, grassroots political think tank here in Baltimore. I think I know all y'all, so I don't think I got to introduce myself too much.
Well, that's a good thing. That's a great thing. So, we're talking about after COVID, after protest, kind of leveraging this moment in Baltimore City, and which I'm trying to get a male depiction of what would be that role. What's next for Baltimore?
Before Adam, it's not just us in the room. People gonna see this. So introduce yourself to like the audience in general.
Oh, you right. My bad. My fault. I'm so used to it being live. My bad.
Right. And then answer. You can answer Queen's questions with that. Give us just a little bit more context for the listeners. There's folks that are listening in that might not be aware of what you do. So,
understood. So I'm Adam Jackson. I'm the Chief Executive Officer for Leaders of a Beautiful Struggle. We are a grassroots political think tank located in Baltimore. We do a lot of political advocacy on behalf of the Black community and in the Black community's interests, particularly as it pertains to policy work here in Baltimore, but also around the state of Maryland. To answer your question about how to leverage the moment, part of the issue is, I think that, Black people, when we get into these moments, I think we kind of tell ourselves the same narrative over and over again, which is no one's doing anything. Nothing has happened before. We can't do anything now. So we have to restart and throw everything out and start new. When the reality is there are already solutions at our feet. The issue is that we're not willing to do, in many cases, the work of building the infrastructure to sustain the change that we want to see outside of this moment. And I think, particularly on these two issues, COVID-19 and police accountability. With COVID-19, it's symptomatic of the structural racism and white supremacy that we know exists, not just in the healthcare system, but it's also the fact that Black people are being impacted and infected at proportionally higher rates than other groups of people is because of the conditions of our communities. And that it requires investment in the infrastructure of our communities and the institutions of our communities to make sure that we can come out of this pandemic with a better economic outlook. I think that a lot of times that's the thing we're the least willing to do. We're willing to feed people to do like food programs. You want to do anti-poverty programs instead of wealth building and wealth creation. And those things actually solve structural problems. But I think white folks have convinced Black people that we need to just do another social program, invest in another white institution, another white nonprofit to service our community, and that will somehow solve the issue. I know early on in March or April, there was all this conversation about food, like we need to make sure people have food. But if you're talking about food security in Baltimore, like you can't solve for that with the pandemic. Like, and they were like, we're running out of all this food. Like, how come we can't feed people during the pandemic? It's like, yeah, because Black people are hungry. We don't have food, and you're trying to solve for it in the middle of a crisis. And so that's the largest thing, is that COVID-19 and police accountability, it all comes down to infrastructure. But to the other piece about police violence, in Maryland, there has been a pretty consistent agenda around holding law enforcement accountable. There's been groups like mine and others who've gone to Annapolis year after year, demanding accountability, demanding legislation be passed to hold police accountable, changing or abolishing the Law Enforcement Bill of Rights, making sure that we can hold them accountable whenever they kill anybody in our community. These are things that we've consistently called for, but it's not the fact that people don't get that they want police accountability. I think that's been actually more mainstream than we've given it credit for. The issue is that there are large mainstream institutions like the Fraternal Order of Police, other large foundations and large corporate institutions that are in our way. And the reason why they're allowed to impede our progress is because, again, we don't have the infrastructure. the Fraternal Order of Police is essentially a publicly funded lobbying organization, because even though they're a union, it's tax dollars that pay the officers that pay for the FOP to exist. And so when we go to Annapolis, they're our opposition. And every year it consistently happens. And I think people want to talk about Trump and some of this national legislation, but reality, it comes down to state and local law. Like if you want to make sure an officer goes to jail, then you have to actually support local and state legislation to change that dynamic. There's nothing that the Congress or Donald Trump can do about that. They can pass a law nationally that says you can't choke a Black person to death. But isn't that a damn shame? You got to pass a law that says you can't choke somebody to death. That should already be illegal to begin with. And people think that somehow has changed. But I think, to kind of wrap up, it comes down to local and state grassroots political advocacy. Everything is local. All politics is local. And that we have to build the infrastructure and the ecosystem to be able to help our communities thrive. And we can't rely on other people or other institutions outside of our community to do it.
Power. All right, Ray. He segued right into what you're doing with the police and the policing project. Weigh in. You muted.
I got it. I'm sorry. I think what Adam said and what TJ said is right on point. It's about, one, changing the infrastructure that kind of orchestrates this system. So for me, it's about accountability, and what we haven't done, like TJ said, is had that leadership that actually makes that their priority and shows the urgency that the community that's being impacted feels. So with things like the consent decree, where we have the sharpest tools in the shed, so to speak, as far as reform processes go, but we don't have, one, the stability in Baltimore City yet, where we've been in a constant state of flux since we've actually entered a reform realm. And two, we don't really have that urgency in our representation. For as long as I've been doing police accountability and reform work, as we get closer to campaign time, accountability always becomes toxic, and it's more about crime reduction, which is also a huge problem that we have here. So the conversation has to move into how do we transform this department and increase public safety or lower crime and homicides. And that's the piece that hasn't had a consistent focus from all parties. So you got half that want to say lock them up, and you have another half that wants to kind of figure out how you lock them up. And then you add in the complexity of legislation having to be changed in Annapolis. So the whole paradigm of police reform in this city, as well as the systemic structural failures that the cities has kind of got us stuck in this point of repeat and repeat. And that's what we have to kind of prioritize and move beyond. That's what we need to strategize around.
So I'm hearing strategize, I'm hearing ecosystem, infrastructure change, politics is local, and if we want to see change at this moment, then some of those things have to be enacted. Is that what I'm hearing, guys?
Yeah, I mean, but the thing is, Ray and Adam is spot on. Like, we pay more attention to the national issues, which they have lesser of an effect on what goes on locally than anything else. It just seems like it's just some sexier thing to talk about. But the local is where it really is a big deal. The legislators in Maryland are a big deal, and we don't take them as such. Most people couldn't even name who their legislators are. And that's a problem, because they're the lawmakers for state law. The things that you might think you need in Baltimore aren't going to happen without the support from legislators around the state. But as we just look at where we are, we missed a moment in 2015. Like, we're looking at 2020 like, okay, here's a moment. No, there was a big moment in 2015 that put a spotlight on underserved communities that have systemic problems. And satellite trucks were in Baltimore, and it was like, this is an area that needs some attention. And then we got quickly pulled away from that because we were focused back on corruption again. And we started seeing the stumbling blocks of corruption. And it's like walking and chewing gum are a big problem for us. We seem to be only able to focus on one thing. We have to focus on multiple things at a time. And it's not fair for us to get distracted from the needed reforms. And people, you know, when I was on the campaign trail, I was often asked about the consent decree, where you have a faction who thinks you get rid of the consent decree because it's hindering police officers' ability to police the city. And, you know, some to think we need it. I said, the proof is in the pudding. The consent decree went into effect in 2017, was negotiated under SRB and former Commissioner Batts, went into effect under Commissioner Davis and Catherine Pugh. And since then, we've had 4 police commissioners, I think, and 3 mayors. So you look at all of that lack of continuity in a matter of just 4 years. And the one thing that's remained consistent are the reforms that are necessary under the consent decree. Had we not had the consent decree, the Baltimore Police Department wouldn't have made the progress that it has made in some of the areas, which some will argue isn't enough and isn't fast enough. But if we didn't have the vehicle of the consent decree, I mean, I couldn't tell you where the police department would be, because as I mentioned, all of those different police commissioners and mayors, they would have had their own vision as to what they wanted under their tenure that wouldn't have had to do with the consent decree and the standards that they had to meet as a result.
Queen.
Yeah.
Well, wait a minute, Dr. Nago, give me a second. Okay, we have Brandon Wilson, our last panelist, our small business owner. So Brandon, kind of introduce yourself, and don't mind the background noise. That's the inner city living, guys. Y'all hear that? Y'all don't hear that. All right, Brandon, talk to us.
Yes, how y'all doing? My name is Brother Brandon. I'm here. I'm the owner of Jumpstart Cleaning Service. We do residential and commercial cleaning here in the state of Maryland. I'm also very active in the community as far as community engagement. I spent 16 years in prison. And so when I was released July 2018, I've been home for 2 years. And so, like I say, since I've been home, I'm very active as a businessman, but also very active engaging men and women in the community, just trying to help bring a change in their life, showing them where I once was, and just showing them that just like I once was, you can, you know, make that transition and basically become new.
Excellent. And let me ask a question. Your cleaning service, it can do the chemical cleaning for COVID-19 and that type of commercial cleaning that people need?
Yes, ma'am. We have all the capabilities to do the COVID-19 cleaning.
Okay.
We're very active and aggressive right now, doing a lot of COVID-19 cleaners for office buildings, churches, even houses, you know.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Excellent. Excellent. Well, you can chime in anytime. Did you hear the last question? Said you just came in. You want me to reiterate the last question for you?
Yes, thank you.
Let's do that for you. We're talking about after COVID, after protests, of course, existing as Black Lives That Matter. But more or less in Baltimore City, how are men going to leverage this opportunity that we are kind of, that we have due to the protest and the reset of COVID? How can Baltimore ascend through the lens of men in the community?
Right. Well, I believe that the way forward, or the path forward, comes with our unity, you know, on all the different levels, because being divided haven't got us anywhere up to this point. So I just think that we need to just come together on our commonality. Number one, that we Black. Number one, and number two, that we trying to get out of this oppressive system. And so just figuring out what we agree on And once we figure out what we agree on, then moving about just very aggressively trying to achieve whatever purpose that we can achieve. But we got to unite. That is the main component. Like, we have to stick together, and we have to just organize. And we got to put our egos aside. And so I just think that if we able to do that, we could begin moving forward. And it's not going to happen overnight. Nothing good happens overnight. It's a process, but we just have to be willing to go through the process.
Okay. All right, we had a little technical. Thank you, brother. All right, Dr. Cleo, come back to you.
All of my life, there's been a season of opportunity of some sort that Black people have had. Excuse me. All of my life, there's been some kind of opportunity. The more recent opportunities, in theory, was Barack Obama as president. More local alleged opportunities for Black people was that it's a so-called Black-run city with a Black mayor. You're referring to, I think it might have been, what's his name? I don't see him anymore. Oh yeah, he's still here. It might have been T.J. Smith who talked about opportunity. That might have somebody in here talk about opportunity. And then before that, one of the panelists talked about there's an unwillingness to do things in our community. I think it was Adam who mentioned leadership. Somebody mentioned no urgency. Somebody mentioned that some of us don't even know who our legislators are. And I think that it doesn't matter what kind of so-called opportunity we have as a people if we're questioning our value as Black people. If we're questioning our value, which is one of the reasons why we don't value knowing who legislators are, then opportunity is not really something that we can respond to if we're questioning our value as Black people. And I don't think the traditional concept of leadership is the issue. For example, at the risk of sounding strange, just now, supposedly Nick Cannon offended some Jewish people.
Oh.
Nick Cannon was fired. We don't know who fired Nick Cannon. Did no Jewish person come out of the woodwork and say, you're fired? Jews have a collective consciousness of never again, don't mess with us. It's a collective perspective. They don't depend on a person or a leader or one individual to tell them to care about Jews. It's the way they were raised. It's the way they're conditioned. Even when they're wrong, I think they're wrong in this instance, they still have been trained to collectively have each other's back. Well, we have some work to do as a people to learn to value having each other's back and to examine why, for too many of us, we second guess the whole idea of having each other's back. If we don't look at these issues from a behavioral perspective, and along with our strategies and techniques, also have strategically as a part of that work to deconstruct the cultural toxicity that has come as a result of unresolved oppression issues for generations, we constantly relapse back into paralysis. We might have some great leaders saying things. I mean, there's some brilliant people I know for a fact right here on this call and who are doing some things. But people are still talking about what happens generally, which is an unwillingness to do things. Before you came, some of you came on to this conversation, TJ talked about some of the people not wearing masks. And there's an unwillingness, despite the death rate that's been reported all on television, for some of us to even practice self-preservation. From my perspective, on an unconscious basis, we're in question of the value of self-preservation as Black people. And I think some words that we use, like the N-word, et cetera, bolster the implication of Black inferiority, which is a traumatizing, stressing self-perspective, whether it's a conscious or unconscious perspective, that clouds our capacity to think logically. So we have to, along with our strategies and different things that we're doing, I think have a simultaneous agenda or strategy to teach us to come out of what I call the white supremacy trauma trance. Because when you're in a trance, no matter how good the recommendation is, including put on a mask, if you're in a trance, you're not fully present. You're not fully involved in your behavioral possibilities because you're in a fog. Mm. When Nick Cannon offended Jews, there was no fog. You're fired. You're gone. You're out of here. And we don't even know we don't necessarily know who's told him that, because we don't need to know who's just somebody Jewish, because Jews ain't playing that. I'm being redundant to reiterate my point of that. This goes beyond leadership. This is the issue of cultural-wide paralysis. Intergenerational cultural-wide paralysis. Even people who have become leaders, such as the sister that was the mayor who got put out of office because of her books or whatever, even she was caught up in some of the side effects of this paralysis, where we get more involved with self because we're too cynical to think about community. Because we're in question, in my opinion, about the value of Black community. And these are not conscious perspectives. These are unconscious perspectives. Some people would argue with me, and some people have argued with me until I broke some of the issues down to them, and they had to say, okay, wait a minute, I think that is true for me. Once I broke some stuff down regarding why is there resistance? Why is there no local response to local issues? Why are we waiting for the sexy thing to come on when there's some things right in our local community that are problematic that we as a majority Black community, in terms of numbers, have the power to change?
I just wanted to follow up on what Doc was saying. And, you know, I'm not going to speak for Ray or Adam, but all of us have been through the ringer by our own people.
Yeah.
And I've had people try to tear me down that I'd never even met before. And it's odd because it's like, man, if we actually had a conversation, you'd be amazed at how much we actually agree. Every time I see Adam, I tell him how proud I am of the work that they're doing. And we don't always have to agree on everything to be proud of one another as Black men trying to do something. At the end of the day, the goal is the same. We don't want to see Black men dead in the city of Baltimore at the hands of police or at the hands of anyone else. We want to see opportunity for people who haven't had opportunity. We have the same vision, and we all might have different ways of getting there, but we have to get into a layer of togetherness and understanding our power. Just because you have Twitter doesn't mean you use that machine to air out everything, your stream of consciousness, because we're airing out dirty laundry sometimes. We could take that behind closed doors and come out stronger together. But the divisiveness for trying to have a viral moment or a viral tweet or trying to be salacious and saying stuff is so childish, and it only serves to divide the community more and divide a lot of what the progress everyone's trying to make. And we have allowed other people who, I laughed because I was looking at, like, whether it was the protests, like, who are some of these people? Like, when did their voice become the voice of reason? And it's not even a voice of reason, but they have all this to say, but they're never there at the moment that's needed. And again, I just had to say that because I know I've seen and I've watched as people have independently tried to tear each other, some of us on this call, down. And it's pretty unfortunate because, again, the more we work together and we actually sit at the table and converse, we would probably see how much we actually have in common and how we can pull our resources together to work towards that common goal, as opposed to these different tracks. And it goes back to Doc's point. When you have different groups and communities that say we're one, and you come for one of us, you came for all of us, look at what happens. Exactly. You know, it would be great if, you know, whatever it was we purchased the most in this city, we saw pop-ups like they build these Dunkin' Donuts with Arabs running them, where it was Black folks running them. But we seem to eat our own, man, and that's a huge problem that we still have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Actually, I agree with you, TJ. I think what happens a lot of the time is that, to your point, there's a real heavy incentive for Black people to destroy each other, you know, and we don't really have to, you know, you can do the enemy's work for them a lot of times, because it's a big incentive for us to just, like, we don't even have to attack, just put folks in the right position, and then they'll just kill each other. They'll destroy each other. And to Dr. Cleo's point, yeah, it's because of the internalized inferiority and internalized racism that drives our people to do that. And, you know, I found myself extremely frustrated over the past, 3 months at this point, 2-3 months, as long as these demonstrations have been happening. Because, you know, it reminds me a lot of 2015, where a lot of the people that are these so-called community advocates, these are people that only show up at that time. These are people that show up, okay, the camera is here, I have some exposure, I want to play arts and crafts on a downtown street with white people, I want to show up at the news conference and, you know, have my face on all over the television, I want to publish my list of demands, even though I haven't demanded anything up until this point. You know, there's all that. But then when it comes time, like you said, when the moment of truth comes, when you have to actually stand up against racist institutions and stand with other Black people who have been doing that already, it's like, well, you know, no, I didn't come for that. You know, I came for that piece. I came for that one part. And then, you know, people get all caught up in, well, I'm doing this and I'm the person that ran this and I'm the one that created this effort and I'm the one that's been at the front. And, you know, kind of that classic cliche, you know, egotistical, there can only be like Highlander, like there can only be one. There can only be one Black person that rises above and can actually change our community. And so I completely agree. I think we actually have to figure out how to vet the leaders who say that they are leading our community and figure out how to stop these imposters, these people who claim that they are Black leaders, and be able to ask them the hard questions. Because one thing I'm clear about, because I'm only 32 years old, but I was very clear early on that in order to be legit in the work, and a lot of this work, you have to be vetted by elders. You have to talk to elders, and you have to be okay with going some places and people with all my years of experience doing what I think is important. Black people being like, man, who the hell are you? And having to constantly re-engage and be like, oh, here's who I am, and here's what I do, and you tell me if it's valuable or useful to you. And I can't be so full of myself that I think that I have risen above the conditions of my people and I'm some kind of celebrity, because what the hell is that? You know, this is not celebrity. This is not ET. This is not Entertainment Tonight. This is about the liberation of our community and destroying racism. And I think when you said TJ, you know, we have a common goal, I think that's the problem. People don't have a common goal. There is no common goal. There's an assumption that we have a common goal. I mean, I would say when I say me and a group or other folks have a common goal, it's Black liberation, Black freedom, destruction of white supremacy. That's my common goal. Other people's common goal is we gonna get money together, or we gonna be on TV together, or we gonna get hooked up together. And I think people be trying to exploit the genuine thrust of people wanting things to change to benefit themselves, because again, that's what it's all about for them. So in order to really get to the level where we can really transform the conditions of our community, some of these folks got to be aired out and kicked out in terms of not of our community, but just out of like, you cannot speak on those issues. You cannot be the person or the group or the individuals who are elevated. The community has to dictate who its leaders are, because otherwise we're just letting white folks hand people to us, and then people are out here making money off of Black death and suffering just because, you know, it's the cool thing to do. You know, I mean, I have asthma. I ain't got time to be in a damn protest at this point. I'm not trying to catch COVID-19. I'm trying to be around for at least 50, 60 more years. But people trying to convince me that I got to be out in the streets, because it's like, yeah, but it's not connected to anything. It's not connected to anything. And, you know, people got to understand what sustainable change is, not just hop in front of these cameras.
But Adam, our community needs literacy around everything you just got finished saying. For example, when ABC, and I might offend somebody, but that's not my intention, but I'm just going to say what I feel. When ABC and CBS and CNN says your saviors, Black Lives Matters, has shown up, well, if Anderson Cooper says Black Lives Matters is our savior, then they're our savior. Now, I don't think they're our savior. I think they show up, you just got finished describing, from our concern, Adam, Black Lives Matters. But our community doesn't have a lot of political literacy, not because it lacks intelligence. Most of the genius in the United States come from our community. Not a whole lot of the self-love come from our self-community and cultural cohesion, but capacity for brilliance is all over the Black community. But there's been a long-term campaign on self-concept, and a lot of what we're dealing with in terms of some things you talked about, Adam, is that there's an epidemic of the fear of irrelevance in our community. Because a lot of us feel irrelevant. We feel like we're N-words. We feel like you're an N-word. We feel like, we're not relevant. So we're waiting for white folks or somebody to say, you're irrelevant. Even the whole Black Lives Matters mantra is, white folks, please let us matter. White folks, please, make us, I don't even deal with the mantra because the whole thing is codependent and weak from my perspective. And because the larger culture co-signs that because they see it as weak too, and they know it's weak, and it's part of their strategy to keep us weak, we need to have more literacy along with whatever else we're doing to get our community to understand this phenomenology that you just described. We got to teach them to be decoders of white supremacist norms in media, in politics, in so-called education, on every level of life in this country, because a lot of us are fooled into thinking that either society is neutral or you got a problem and you're too angry, Black person. Otherwise, it's a neutral society. We don't, you know what I mean about people thinking that it's really neutral? So we don't have any urgency. Somebody else said this earlier about there's no urgency. Well, there's no urgency if people you don't care about are getting hurt. And we've all seen, for example, the perpetual apologies that Black people have been showcased to give to white supremacists when they done some dirt to us, like that dude who called himself a queer in Central Park, who almost got his life taken because of this white woman, the bird watcher. You know who I'm talking about. And he didn't, and he's not even pressing charges or moving on it or nothing because he don't want to mess up the hair of a damsel in distress. And you saw what happened with Bolton John's family when they were playing in the hair of their murderer. You understand what I'm saying? I mean, we cannot expect a community to act clear and take advantage of this organic common sense if there's confusion everywhere, and that confusion is not decoded or deflected when we're doing the work that we're doing around trying to transform the community. Because I'm sorry, y'all, the community is confused. And the words that came out of this conversation from the very beginning, unwillingness to do things, a lack of leadership, no urgency, don't know who the legislation is, people having opportunities they don't take advantage of. The bottom line is that you don't feel worthy of an opportunity, you're not going to take advantage of an opportunity. And if you've been told by or Anderson Cooper, somebody else, that Black Lives Matters is your opportunity, then everybody else in your local community has no credibility. In contrast, which is completely insane. Because the people like Adam, for example, who I know enough about his work to be able to say this without stuttering, should have more local credibility than Black Lives Matters, who's been dormant since 2016 or something like that, and waited till George Floyd was murdered, and here they are again. And now they're making trans lives matter, and everybody else's lives matter, interrupting the focus on the murder of Black men, when only 18 trans people were killed, over 1,000 brothers were killed. But we're supposed to jump up and down over 18 people, which is tragedy that those people were killed. But I'm trying to let us realize how we're being snowed, how we're being distracted and manipulated. And the bottom line, at the risk of being redundant, is that our work needs to create literacy in our community and decoding capacity to see through this stuff so we can stop being distracted by it. Because that's why we're not taking advantage of opportunity, in quotes, after opportunity. Queen asks, well, what do we do now? Well, there's some stuff that we should have been done that we need to do now, which includes decoding the entrapment of white supremacy confusion embodied by Black people who they select to lead us. We got to deconstruct that stuff, or else nothing's going to change. It's going to be COVID 23 going to come, and we're going to be having this conversation.
That's a mouthful right there. So when we talk about Baltimore and its micro issues, and we have a whole new leadership we're getting ready to vote in, and it looks like we're going to have a new mayor, new contract, new everything, new. I think all of the offices in Baltimore are changing, and we said part of our issue is politics and the literacy of how we apply politics. So what's going to happen next in Baltimore with this new leadership? Are these candidates for our community? Are we going to go forward? Are we going to be able to structure our police force? What is going to happen next in Baltimore City when it comes to what we're going through kind of political?
I just think that no, our savior not going to come from that system. I mean, like nobody. So if we thinking that a mayor, a president, a city councilman, like I believe that the change has to come from amongst the people, like homegrown people, like because our workers in the streets, like the youth, like the brother said, like the doctor said, he said that they believe that they are niggas. And so they believe that going to jail and dying is the sum of their life. I was once that individual. So, when they believe that going to jail and dying, that is it, like that's a problem. So
that's manhood.
We have right. And so that's become the mark of manhood or the rites of passage. Going to prison has become a rites of passage in Baltimore City. We're just going to deal with Baltimore City because, like TJ said, let's deal with the local. So going to prison, getting shot has become a rites of passage. So, like, that is a problem. So we have to have resources being put in the community to be able to properly teach and train these youth on financial literacy, because they believe that all they can do is sell dope. And for some people, it's easier to get a gun than it is to get a job. Or it's easier to go get a pack of drugs than it is for them to get a job. So I believe that it is the duty of the people of the city to hold these candidates accountable. Because, like I say, if we don't have no resources in East Baltimore, if we don't have no resources in West Baltimore, like, the condition is going to continue. Like, I did 16 years in prison. When I came home, I'm looking at the infrastructure of the city. Like, the infrastructure was decayed, dying, weeds everywhere. So this had the 16 years. So if the condition of the infrastructure was going down, then you know that the condition of the thinking of the people were going down as well. So I think that if I come outside every day, I'm seeing nothing but boarded up houses. I'm seeing nothing but drugs. I'm seeing nothing but chaos and confusion my whole life. I began believing that this is what right is, if I'm not seeing nothing else. So I began believing that this is right. This is normal. So, like, I think that like, just holding them accountable for what they say they're going to do. If you say you're going to allocate certain funds for these organizations, like, yeah, we need to see that, because and so that way these organizations can properly do what they do wherever they are in the city, because it's people in different pockets all over the city putting in work, but maybe they don't have enough resources that can help them grow and advance even more.
That's a good way to look at it. Wow. So,
Queen, people need accountability literacy.
It's no change in communities because of lack of access. That's what I'm hearing. The accessibility of resources to the community is the reasoning for a lot of the chaos we see out here in the community with young people. So if you're saying you want to hold these politicians accountable, the question is, should we harvest our own candidates? We got to bring candidates forth.
Right, and I think we can't omit the steps that we have to go to, because you're right. The goal is to elect people that represent our agenda. So not only do we start now with accountability for who's elected to office currently, or who'll be stepping in November or December, but for real, we need to start growing our own candidates and getting them ready for when we want to actually push real systemic change. So I think in my purview, it's always going to be about consistency and persistence to actually make change happen. And I've said for years that when they redlined this city, they kind of buried us with the biggest weapon in the world because they knew we wouldn't use it. And that weapon is the vote. If we got all of our residents to a point where they believed that voting would work and they could elect the people they need to elect to get this job done, then that could actually change the paradigm in this city and a lot of cities around the country. And I think that's the first step we have to take, is those of us that are engaged to a point of access to accountability for our representatives have to push that much harder, because people really don't believe change is possible anymore. And there's definitely a deficit of hope in our communities that change will ever come. So we have to show them that if we stay at it and we work hard, things will change. I mean, I've been doing this police and community relations thing now for 12 years. And like TJ said, I've been attacked from every possible angle you can imagine: the police, community, organizations. And just to reiterate Adam's point, this whole nonprofit complex kind of makes actual change that much harder because of the competition we have with our own people. I won't say they're our own community because they don't really live there. And we've learned over the years that the funding doesn't go to the most effective program. The funding goes to the best grant writers. And that's those issues where those of us that are actually on the street and providing the needed access to resources don't really have that time. We don't have that backing of the white complex and all these foundational efforts where our goal then just becomes to serve.
I hear where infrastructure would come into place. If there wasn't infrastructure, then you can apply things, to me, faster and harder because you have something to go to. But like Adam said, with no infrastructure, we're just out here, one or maybe three of us, we're not doing anything substantive.
I mean, oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, I mean, I think that's absolutely right. Because, I mean, even to the question of the political question you initially asked about, you know, what's going to be different. We have a whole new city council, a whole new mayor. You know, we had a whole new city council and a whole new mayor in 2016. She went to prison. She, you know, and a lot of these younger people who were, that now were younger in 2016, you know, that were like the new vanguard, you know, and this is not to say that the Baltimore City Council that is currently in place and that some of the people who are going to be joining have not done good stuff and have not been useful, you know, and to say that they are not attempting at the very least to push the needle on some things. But one thing that one of my babbas used to tell, he told me this like several years ago. He asked me, because I came to him all fire and brimstone, like I want to change Baltimore and this and that, you know, we're going to take back the city. And the first question he asked me was, are you independently wealthy? And I was like, what does that mean? That's not related to that. Like, you don't have to have money to make change. And he looked at me like, well, who's going to pay for all the stuff you're talking about? Because you're talking about systemic change. So how are you going to sponsor the so-called Black revolutionaries you think should be in office? How much does it cost to run a city council campaign? And I was like, well, right, like $60,000, maybe like $40,000 to $60,000. He's like, right, and that's like what, a 13-member council, 14-member council. He said, you got enough money to support those people that you want on the council. What about the mayor? It costs at least $1 million to be mayor. So what are you going to do that to be mayor? I was like, you know what? You're right. I don't have the money. He's like, right. So you're trying to solve for a structural problem that you think being eloquent, being smart, and having all the correct arguments is good enough. And I think that's the problem that these younger politicians and younger elected officials have. They don't have any infrastructure, and the infrastructure that is behind them, you know, are unions, traditional white mainstream corporate institutions. You know, the same people who pay for every other Black person to be in office. And I think that's not a shot. That's the facts. That's just, you know, if you don't have your own resources, then someone has to pay for it. And to say and I think sometimes people in our generation, like I guess what you call the millennial generation, what people say is like, well, I'm going to get in there just because X white man and X white corporation sponsored me. watch how I get in there and I'm not going to be accountable to those white folks. It's like, nah, Bob Embry is waiting for you to do what he said. He's going to wait. He's going to make sure you do what he says. And not because, and it's not as simple as, you know, he calls you on the phone and tells you, darky, do my bidding. That's not how it happens. It's much more subtle than that. You know, these institutions expect outcomes. And so the city council and the mayor, to the extent we can hold them accountable and make sure we hold their feet to the fire, that's what I expect out of them. I expect them to do things as the community puts pressure on them. If you ask me to sit them in a room and to come up with progressive legislation and do things that are actually going to transform the conditions of Black people, you know, I'm not waiting around for that. You know, I would much rather give them the agenda, like give them an agenda that's community centered and be like, do that or else. And that's how, because otherwise you let people think, you let them come up with things. It's like, yeah, I get it. Your sponsors don't want this to happen, but you have to be forced to make it happen because you live in a Black city. You're an elected official in a Black city. So you have to do things that the community says. And besides that, besides the money piece, a lot of these folks are not studied. People, I mean, Black people are the only people on the planet that you can say you speak for Black people, but never read a damn thing about Black people written by Black people. There's no rigor. There's nothing. It's just like, I'm a leader. It's like, how are you a leader? Because I'm Black and I'm passionate and I'm smart. So who said that? Who said that all you needed to do? You know, and I think that we get so caught up in, you know, I'm running for this district and, you know, I have all the correct policy proposals, but no one gave you that title. No one said that you were actually appropriate for that position. You just said so. And that's like, to me, that's really anti-Black. That's like, you can't go into a Jewish community saying I'm a leader of the Jewish community without being vetted by the Jewish community. But Black people are the only group of people that let you walk up, stand up and say, I'm a leader of the Black community with no one saying so. And in many cases, other people that aren't Black saying so. You know, people saying that, lifting up folks like a DeRay McKesson or other folks saying like, this is our leader, this is our person, you know. And I think that's the problem that a lot of them are going to fall into. I think that'll be a challenge that they see when they're elected, because I don't think I think a lot of intentions are really good, you know, but again, when you know things like Port Covington, the Johns Hopkins police force, you know, you see who people are when the stakes are high, and you see where people's votes fall and how they act when white folks' money is at stake. You know, I'll leave it at that.
If it wasn't for the question of Black people's value, Adam, none of that would be, or a lot of that you're talking about wouldn't be happening. If we could all get on the same page and agree that we value, and that Black life value, and Black prosperity, Black power, Black political capacity matters because we Black human beings who have not had that historically in this country, and we're going to take it and have it because we're worthy of it. We wouldn't have to have this second guessing and all this crazy stuff because you just got finished saying, if I'm interpreting your words correctly, that there are white appointed Black people who come into the community and they get resourced sometimes to look like a leader. And here we are with a so-called leader who has no track record or capacity to be a benefit to Black people. Well, we care about Black people and we are literate about that phenomena, and more of us were, and we were trained to successfully value Black people, that stuff wouldn't work.
Right.
People go, who are you and what literally have you done? Not what conceptually or what some white boy put in a glossy photo to say you did, in very relaxed states going, what have you done? Because we need to not beat each other up, even when people need to get beat up. It's not a good optic. So we asked them, what have you done? What's going on? Anyway, we need to have a meeting like this that ain't on tape too.
Well, yeah, this is the talk. This is not the strategem. So those are two different movements. So we're having the talk.
But I'm just saying that because the first thing I said earlier, before the conversation started, I talked about silos and how we need to do some collaborative strategic work.
Absolutely.
Because power is not individual, power is collective.
It is. It is. It definitely is. So let me pose another question to you, to my men. Now, Baltimore has the issues to me that are grassroots. And it is everyone using it on this call, they're doing grassroots work. Grassroots to me is it's like the gateway to the healing of Baltimore, and then access to the resources, legislative policies change. So there's to me like this hierarchy of what Baltimore needs. And it starts with grassroots organizations. So from henceforth, with this nonprofit complex problem we have in Baltimore City, how are we going to be able to move forward and solve some of the real issues from henceforth with all of the leverage that I think we have as Black people? You guys understand that question?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody quiet. Let me introduce John P. Comer. John?
I'm John Comer. I was late for an emergency. I apologize, but run an organization named Architects of Justice. But at the end of the day, I am a community organizer to the core, grassroots, and have been able to be a part of some great work here in Baltimore that's pushed Black folks forward through organizing in public housing, organizing with ex-felons to get voting rights back, as well as something that led to, a $9 million settlement for women in public housing years ago. So I'm just glad to be here.
Okay. So you running a grassroots organization. Baltimore has micro issues that has to be addressed, and most of it's grassroots because we understand more or less the people. So from henceforth, how once we get out of these restrictions and we see Baltimore is changing. I see everything has stopped but construction. I see everything being constructed around Baltimore, the roads, Hopkins, but the people and the neighborhoods are still decaying. So what is the answer? What's the next answer for Baltimore City and our community? Jump into that.
So I think the key is to continue to engage the people. So we got to recognize that what we do on social media or in our quote unquote silos or whatever that case may be still brings the same players to the table. So if we're actually going to promote systemic change, our strength comes in our numbers. So we have to be the people that our communities trust. And we have to build that relationship. It's kind of on us to do what we can to educate our people about this process to get them engaged, especially in a police reform paradigm where, like everyone said, there's a historic distrust in policing in our community, but we have to continue to talk to these people, engage these people, present whatever opportunities, legislative or resource, that they can actually influence and do what we can do to show them once again that these changes can happen, but it's going to take all of us. Because once again, we put on a good forum in this type of format, but how many unregistered voters are on this Zoom call? So those are the populations we should start focusing our energy on now, while everyone's train of thought is focused on abolishing systemic racism and holding police accountable and all those things that we as organizations fight for. Now is an opportunity to educate more of the populace that's been impacted by this forever to actually get involved to push for real change.
And building better communities starts with building a more educated community as well. And if we look at how we educate our kids, we have to look at educating our children differently than we've been educating them. One of the things that's come up multiple times on the call here today is that independence, that freedom, that generational wealth, that opportunity. And we aren't necessarily teaching kids as they graduate high school how to be on that path to generational wealth. Kids aren't graduating with financial literacy to really understand the value of a dollar and understand what it means to go to work. They aren't understanding how to file their taxes, how to maintain their credit score, and the long-term impacts that can have on them. Where you see other communities that do this and do this well, and they're able to pass down real estate from generation to generation, which builds that generational wealth. But moreover, a city that's 63% Black has to churn out more Black millionaires. We don't have enough Black millionaires, and we have to specifically invest in Black business in the city. I mean, a carve out of the budget should be dedicated to Black business in and of itself, so that you can increase that wealth in our city of Black people. You can look at cities like Atlanta and the Atlanta metro area and see how that grew and how Black millionaires grew as a result. Now, it does take a lot of, you're going to put yourself at risk as a politician by taking such approach, because you can look back on the mayors of these towns that did it and their political careers didn't last long or didn't go without a whole bunch of, adversaries. But that's part of being bold and making decisions that are good for future generations to really disrupt this cycle of what the communities have fallen into. There's nothing different in most of these communities than was there 20 years ago or 30 years ago. It's the inaction over many generations and beyond one mayor, that last mayor, and to that earlier point, I probably should abstain from even commenting on the political process, but I do just have to say, because you said we have a change, I mean, I just have to make it a rhetorical question. Do we really have a change? Everybody who's taken over has been in elected office for more than a dozen years or more than a decade, basically. So, I mean, I don't know if we have a change. I mean, we're changing some seats and titles around, but we're not really changing a mindset. So, but it's not any individual, regardless of who the individuals are. It's the collective individuals. They and just having gone through this, and this goes back to Doc's earlier point. There's a known thing in Baltimore politics. There's the Jewish vote. There's you got to go to the kingmakers to get the Jewish vote. They're voting in these blocks to get the agenda, and it's not coincidence that you go and cross over Northern Parkway and the world changes. It's not by coincidence, it's by design. But we have to understand the power we have and start to unite and fight for what we want, what we need in order to better our communities. And I'll close with this, just something that stands out to me, and Ray might know a little bit more. It's outside of his area, but down in West Baltimore, the old Ice House down there, and right on Mulberry there, burnt down last year again, but it burnt down earlier back in 2004, I think was one of the big fires that they had there. And it's been vacant ever since. And there's a lot of vacant homes along Mulberry Street as your gateway to downtown Baltimore. And I look at that area and I'm scared of the word gentrification. And a developer was eyeing that old Ice House to make it an amphitheater and a beer garden. And I said, who the hell going to who are they marketing that to? And I said, are they letting this community die so they can mow down all of these homes to throw up some trendy condos that gives you a gateway straight downtown? And this is part of the problem where we have to demand more and want more from what we are left to live in and exist in.
Good observation. Whew. That's a great observation. All right, Brother Brandon, you want to jump in that?
Yeah, I guess I'll say that when he was talking about the education, because, I had the blessing to be in some of these schools. And I mean, in the state of Maryland, we only really have 2 schools in the top 50 of schools in the state of Maryland. When you look at the school system, right, the top 5 schools are in Montgomery County. So when you say, okay, the top 5 schools in the state of Maryland, we're talking about high schools in Montgomery County, right? So we know in Montgomery County, that's one of the richest counties in the state of Maryland. Right? I don't know if it's the richest, but it's one of the richest. So, okay, they have the top 5 schools. Their income is high in that area. So their schools are going to be good in that area, which also says that their teachers are going to be the best, because you're not going to bring a teacher who don't do so well into a high income, high rating school. So what we have in our community is where as though our children are receiving inferior education. So to the point where as though in Baltimore City, and I've been in multiple schools, they are allowed to have earphones on in class. I believe this is a problem. Like just the fact that you are able to have earphones on in the class, and this is throughout the whole school. So I'm just saying, when we talking about education, like I think that should be that's just simple as, like, everybody should agree children should not be able to come to school and have earphones on in class. Like, that's a problem. Because now in the era that we in, they on their phones on social media, so they learning more on social media that's bringing them down than what they should be learning in the education field. So to the point where though they don't even value education, they don't even see a need for education, because in their mind they don't even think nothing about themselves anyway. So I just wanted to chime in, just on the education piece.
I did not know that you could have earphones in a classroom.
I mean, think when I was in school, I remember. So I was in middle school back in the '80s, and I remember when pagers were a drug dealer thing. You were either a doctor or a drug dealer, and you couldn't bring a beeper to Baltimore City Public Schools, and it was called expulsion. You got expelled out of the entire city school system because it was synonymous with drug dealing. That's how serious it was back then. So today, it blows my mind when I go to visit schools or what have you, and how many kids have cell phones every day. I mean, headphones is like, that is what it is. But the amount of cell phones, and the teachers basically making deals with them, I'm not going to take it, but you got to turn it off. It's just such a distraction that, we're even bending with the rules, and we have gotten under this presumption of the parents having this need to contact their kids if it's an emergency. Well, again, I'm not old fashioned. I don't want to pretend to be, but there's still a method and a way that you can get in contact with your child if there's an emergency, and they don't need that added distraction when a teacher's trying to teach 25 kids in a classroom of having a cell phone. It's pretty unfortunate that some of the rules have gotten so lax that we introduce these distractions and they can happen.
Because if you don't have a cell phone, you won't have earphones. So
right, basically.
Cell phone, you get rid of a lot of ancillary issues.
Maybe they have a Walkman or something. I don't know.
Oh Lord, you went to a Walkman.
But guess what? I'm sorry.
Yeah, like you say, distracted to the point where as though if there's a fight or if there's a problem going on one floor, they communicate and saying, "Listen, we ready to meet up in such and such stairwell." Like, yeah, like this is going on in multiple schools. So I mean, like, that's why I say, like, that's a problem. Like, they should not be able to come to school and be able to sit in class with their cell phones and earphones. That's just a big distraction. So that right there, that could change so much if they just would not be allowed to have that in the class. That could change.
That could change a lot.
But guess what, brothers and sisters? Even here in Baltimore, let alone in DC, Tulsa, Oklahoma, Central Los Angeles, we used to be way more, as a people, focused, way more respectful, way more unified, way more collectively prosperous. And I remember when I was a kid, everybody in the neighborhood knew each other's children and took care of each other's children. I'm not giving fantasy land here and making it. I'm telling you what we used to do. And no matter where we went in the society or across country, what's up, brother? What's up, sister? What's up, cuz? Which was short for cousin. And we had more of an affinity for each other. I mean, there was exceptions to everything, but I'm talking about generally. there was a tip of the hat when you saw another brother. Now, and I've literally tested this, you lucky if somebody looks at you in the eye if you happen to be going in opposite directions while you're walking down the street. Now, instead of just complaining about what we do, I want to reintroduce the fact of what we used to do. A lot of our young people have no idea how respectful, relatively speaking, we used to be of each other. And the reason that there's such thing as so-called HBCUs in this country, some very, very old, is because Black people value education. That's why there's a Morgan, et cetera, because Black people do value education. So we're very nuanced people with all kinds of gems and great possibility, in fact, in our community. But we're constantly given a commercial of how horrible we are. And we have internalized that commercial. Brandon talked about some of that leading to his life that he once had in terms of seeing no value in who he was and other people like him. And our work toward problem solving has to deconstruct and crystallize that, not just as a complaint, but as an educational platform to let us, so we can look at how we've been and be real clear about what happened that interrupted that got us where we are now. And when we keep talking in abstracts about the problems of Black people, instead of looking at what we have done, what we can do, we stay in this funk of low expectations. But as Black people, we've done some great, I'm talking about not great things for everybody in a generic sense, but great things for us. We all know about Black Wall Street, blah, blah, blah. So we need to reiterate and highlight these things that we've done so we can reawaken that possibility in Black people, because we used to be more politically aligned. We used to know who the legislators were. We used to be the legislators. But there's been an interruption. Some of that look like crack, some of that look like institutional white supremacy in schools, some of that looks like taking things away to ensure that they're in chaos. And we're in that chaos. But a lot of our young people don't even know that we're in chaos because we think it's just Black culture. We don't even have nothing to contrast it with because we don't know about another reality, which we need to know about. So so-called leadership or so-called forward motion activity toward the goal of transformation and helping the community needs to be a literacy process on us understanding where we have been and where we can be again, and what literally happened that took us off course. Because some things took us off course. I mean, I don't have time to get into all of it, but when Adam talked about people coming in who'd never done anything, suddenly becoming these great leaders and stuff like this, or getting all this play as leaders, that's part of what was done. You know, the Black leader decoy, the decoy effect, which is a literal strategy to keep us in chaos and following the wrong folks, so we can never go from stage one to stage two or wherever the next stage is. We keep staying in stage one of chaos because there's always we think we live in a neutral society, so the whole idea of interrupters doesn't even compute because we're conditioned to think we live in a neutral society or white Jesus is going to come take care of it at some point. And that's a whole nother conversation that's going to keep us here a long time, but it's a central issue. Some of us think it's sacrilegious to complain about white supremacy. That we're going that, and this is all unconscious. And I'm not just talking smack. I've literally, as a therapist and as a behaviorist, if you will, done interviews and spoken to Black people about these issues. I remember I did a workshop in California where this woman, she was 60 years old and she was a minister. And when she got finished with the course, which was a 2.5-day course, she actually said in front of the class, now I feel like I have permission to care about Black people. Because I was trained to think that it was racist to prioritize Black people's issues. That was wrong. And she had never articulated that before. She articulated that because the workshop led her into a place where she actually started talking, going into this, what do you call it, stream of consciousness, where these things came out that she didn't know what was going on with her. And there's a lot of Black people with issues happening with us that we have never articulated. And because we haven't articulated them, that lack of articulation is a block to functional behavior as a people. We gotta do some unblocking, y'all, or else we're gonna have COVID-23, COVID-28, or whatever the hell the next number gonna be, and we're gonna have these same conversations.
Wow.
We got to unpack where we once were, relatively speaking, as a people, with Tulsa, places in Florida, even here in Baltimore, in this very city, there were groups of Black people who worked together and who were more united. In this very city, you heard of the Arch Social Club?
Mm-hmm.
Have everybody heard about that?
The oldest one in the country.
Well, that social club was built at a time of more Black unification and more collective expectation of Black possibility that was a cultural norm for us, that we now, in too many cases, are just the opposite of that in terms of Black expectation. Black expectation is low. And I'll close my tangent by saying, and it ain't a coincidence. It's part of a strategy that has worked. These things are strategic. This is not a neutral country. And this is not a city dealing with a neutral politic. I mean, somebody already mentioned the Jewish blocks and how they take care of business. And how they have an eye on some place that somebody already mentioned for beer and something that they're focused on and feeding into the possibility of current community chaos. So they can go in there and do what they're gonna do. And this has happened all over the country, even in Harlem, in Compton, the South Central Los Angeles, where I'm from, which was known as a historically Black community. You can now see two white men walking down the street with their poodle in South Central Los Angeles. What you laughing at, TJ Smith? But I'm just telling y'all, and y'all gonna see people walking down St. Paul and walking down Calvert up in this area, two white boys with their poodle.
Oh, you already see that. Like
Street.
Greenmount, Station North, as they call it now.
Station North. That's a white station.
North alone.
I look at it like, wow. But no, your point when you said the two poodles, I was in New York and I happened to meet a guy working at a shop in Manhattan. And I think I had my Orioles cap on or whatever. And he asked me, was I from Baltimore? And we started talking. And he lived in Harlem. And he said, I said, I haven't been up to Harlem in a while. And he said, man, you see Fufu walking down the street with a little poodle and all. And I said, wow. He talked about how it changed. And, that's that gentrification that we don't want. And you look at a city like D.C., and I joke about people because Baltimore got a chip on their shoulder, but D.C. got a chip on their shoulder big time. I said, most of y'all never even lived in the city of D.C. Y'all lived around D.C. And really now, D.C. is no longer majority Black. And they've squeezed and suffocated the middle class right up out of that city. And that's not the type of Baltimore that needs to be built. I think we've learned a lot over the years of failed strategies. The whole term housing projects should be done with. We should be past that. And we aren't past that in Baltimore. We still have housing projects. And we know we're putting low-income people on top of low-income people. And that's not a fair way to create community. And that's part of the disruption of the process, where we have to build affordable housing and fair housing for everyone that's inclusive and not put people with similar circumstances on top of each other. And that goes both ways. I mean, exclusive communities that cause these problems if a Black kid in a hoodie's walking through them, and this exclusive community says you don't belong here, we're creating a problem that way as well. So it's a big conversation, but there are opportunities with this blank slate that is Baltimore. And I say blank slate because of all of the redevelopment that needs to happen, all of the investment that needs to happen to create the community that we all want to see, which is an inclusive community. And the question obviously is, how do we get there? It's connecting those dots. It's not the continued conversation about it. It's the actual policy of making it happen and making it a reality.
That's
I don't want to see an inclusive community.
John, you want to jump in? John, give us something.
I mean, there's so many levels to this. I can curse, right? Because all right.
You.
I mean, it's so many levels to this shit that I think what everyone is saying is right. I think like figuring out the order of it and like the most important steps and beginning with people right where they are in their communities, never taking our eye off of how we've been manufactured. And so like any trauma, any outburst, any disrespect, much of it can go back to the manufacturing of our people. We've been engineered in so many different ways.
Yep.
So like kind of starting with the understanding. And also, you know, I don't necessarily believe that by putting people who don't make a certain amount of money together, that it's all these issues. And that's where I come from by saying we must remember that this has been engineered, because there's no coincidence that the genius brother and sister that you know that came from your community ended up with an addiction. And, you know, at times when they're clean and sober, you still see that brilliance in them. You still experience that. So, you know, certain zip codes, certain neighborhoods were targeted to take the potential leaders or the people who were going to be leaders away from them. So I think that's important for us to remember, like when we're out organizing, dealing with folks. And then sometimes it's going to take like some real hard ass loving organizing and whip us up out of a victim mentality. Because I think that, you know, I'm seeing all of these slogans with Black Lives Matter and all of that. And like some of the slogans that we're promoting are weak as hell, especially compared to the Black Power movement. So to me, it kind of speaks to trying to keep people in a victim stance. Like you will never hear me say, please stop killing us, because the folks that are killing us don't understand that language. There's another kind of language and action that has to be taken against those people. Please stop killing us is some of the weakest shit I've ever heard, right? And like, rest in peace to all the brothers and sisters who died from asphyxiation. Oh my God, died from being suffocated and choked. But like, I don't think it's cool for us to be walking around with shirts that saying I can't breathe, right? Like, I'd rather put on a shirt saying I'm going to motherfucking breathe and I dare you to stop it, right? Like, so at the end of the day, like those of us who are in the community have to pull together with the strength that we have and go uplift the folks in our communities who don't have that, who've been fighting, who have given up, who end up disenfranchised because that's a part of the plan, you know, who don't see any value in this. One more thing, I also just want to say, those of us who have upward mobility have to recognize we have a bit more upward mobility than our people. So when it comes to Black businesses, like, so at the end of the day, you ride down Pennsylvania Avenue and you can look around and you can point out what's not there, which is a sign of what needs to be there. And if you have upward mobility, that means that you could be putting a store right here for your people. Because to me, it's not just good enough to support Black business, it's about supporting Black community-minded business, because that Black business could be doing the same thing that Korean business does, come into the community, make the money, go home somewhere in the suburbs and not put any money back into that. And so businesses have to be organized, because at the end of the day, the folks in Annapolis, the folks in DC, they listen to money, right? And so if we organize our money, and sometimes, and so like I almost feel like there has to be sectors of organizing. So I don't want to discount any portion of organizing. So there are the folks who are working on trying to fix this whole nonprofit industrial complex. But then there's folks who are, you know, working to get grants and pass more policies from the government. But then I also believe that you have to have people that look at the economy and look at where we are and say, you know what, we're not necessarily going to reach and compete in this economy. We need to go back to bartering in some of our communities, exchanging services for services, goods for services. And that helps to also build the relationships in our community. Like, so at the end of the day, we see a lot of bad things about Baltimore, but I tell you one thing, for a city that is coming with so much violence, that system of hacking, that says a lot. The fact that there's so much going on, but I still trust you to come pick me up on the side of the road and I'll give you my money to take me wherever. That should be a catalyst for us to stand on and look at and realize this shit can work, because that system of hacking is organized in its own way, right? It's organizing and it's thriving. It's not dying, it's thriving. So you already have a system in place to organize off of, because people can look at one another and say, I need a ride. And it's not, I'm not going to get in the car with you. I don't know you. It's not that. It's not that. So like looking at that, and another thing, West Side Shopping Center. I had just come back from a trip outside the country, and I was somewhere. I was somewhere, and I saw folks from West Africa lined up on the sidewalk, and one person was there selling like maybe beans and had a bucket of it. The next person was selling like fabric. The next person, and they were all lined up. Now, when I came back from Africa and I went to the West Side Shopping Center, now this was in the parking lot, right? Now, like, you know, it's not supposed to be happening, but what I saw was the spirit of our ancestors. It's a brother out there in this parking space fixing cars. It's a brother out there selling grapes from his truck. It's a brother out there, you know, and it was so on and so on. And so we have to like connect with who we are as a people and recognize that we don't do this shit the way that these white folks do. And we got to be comfortable with how we do things and build from there and stop, you know, like not trying to mimic or anybody. Who we have to be who we are and build from there. And it's naturally in us, right? But once we start to conform and go through these structures, and even some HBCUs, you'll come out whiter than you was black when you came in, right? So like even some of these structures have been co-opted by dollars, because dollars are a white supremacist method. You know, money is dirty, period, right? In this country, it's all blood money. So I just think that like really like looking at and trying to pay attention to what we see and where we are, and like there are a lot of beautiful things which I know y'all know. I'm speaking to the choir that are going on here, and I just think that system of hacking is one of the greatest things that we could build off of. It shows that there's an economy to be built our way. But what'll end up happening is they try to illegalize the shit, because technically it's supposed to be illegal, right? But yeah, you know, that's where I am.
That right there, I never even looked at hacking like that. That is genius, the way that you put that.
It's genius what we're doing.
Oh,
right?
Absolutely. All right, guys, jump in. Who's next? Anybody got else on that topic, or we're gonna move on? Anybody else want to swim into that?
I just want to add that Eric Garner died doing what he suggested. I agree with him, but what I'm responding to is him saying that they're making it illegal for us to barter and operate the way that we want to operate. And that's what Eric Garner was doing when the cops hit him up and murdered him. He was giving cigarettes to people who wanted cigarettes,
right,
for a good price.
Right.
Yeah, even Baltimore City is establishing a certificate you would need, like, you know, the women who sell dinners and people who sell food, and then they're establishing a certificate that you would have to get to do that in the streets of Baltimore, or to sell a dinner out your house. So everything that it seems that the people create, they co-op.
Indeed.
And make it something big, something that we have to fight to do. And these are things we traditionally do to try to make it in a society where we're being oppressed.
Yes,
so it seems like the walls keep coming. Now Big Mama can't make money off the dinners for the babies. It's always
see, Queen, we don't gotta. I'm gonna cuss once just to make my point. Inspired by Mr. Connor. We don't gotta take this shit.
Oh, okay.
We don't have to tolerate none of this. Particularly if we come from a collective perspective. That's why I brought up what's his name? The dude who was fired and got hired after he apologized and groveled. What's his name?
Nick.
That's why I brought him up. It's like the Jews said, we ain't having it. They didn't come to him and grovel. They said, oh, we're not having it. Your ass is fired. And we cannot have it too.
Brother Cleo, that's 2 curses, bro. 2.
But my point is that we as a people cannot have it. We can say, particularly in a city that's damn near 70% black, we can say, hell no.
Mm-hmm.
But we have to go get past some stuff simultaneously to the other work for us to get enough clarity to have enough self-love and respect to say, hell no, we're not gonna have it. But I'm gonna close by saying it's not true that we don't have infrastructure either. That's a myth. We do. And what Connor just talked about in terms of
Comer.
I'm sorry, brother. I want to get it right. Comer. John P. Comer. I want to get it all right.
My man.
Yeah, I'm sorry, brother. Comer. He talked about hacks and hacks that are set up in a way that we trust them because of how they're promoted. So we get in a stranger's car that could be the hillside stranger. We don't know. But there's a system put in place where we actually trust it. Well, I've been to West Africa and East Africa. I go to Africa all the time. Matter of fact, I'm getting homesick because of this damn COVID thing and I can't travel because I'm always going before COVID came. But we could do anything we want to do, particularly in predominantly black cities where we have numbers. But it's the same kind of internalized black inferiority myth and white superiority myth that have too many of us acting like the Azanians or the so-called South Africa deal when there was 3 white folks running the lives of 3 billion black folks. Because we've been trained to believe the hype intergenerationally. That's why I brought up white Jesus, because some of us unconsciously think that to actually challenge whiteness, we'll get mad and we'll fight, but then we'll relapse, which is why even before the Panthers, we were fighting against police brutality and we still fighting the same fight. Because something always happens that disrupts our capacity to win that fight and go to the next thing. And we have the power and the capacity and the numbers and the people to do it. But we don't have enough strategies to do it. Well, we do have strategies. I mean, what John P. Comer just said was talking about the strategies and things that we built that are built inside of us that we dismiss because we're the source. Black people are the source. And that part is not natural. That part comes from the conditioning and the interruption that makes us second guess our possibilities as a people. So I'm gonna be redundant and reiterate that we're gonna keep on relapsing to talking about why we can't get past stage 1 until we deal with those mythologies and pathologies and myths in particular that has us questioning our possibilities. Therefore, we don't get beyond stage 1. We got to make that part of our work, or else we're gonna have the same complaint, like I said before, until we get to COVID-99.
If we become organized, we can do anything. And so at the end of the day, if there's one community that has enough contacts, if there's a carry out on the corner and they don't support the community, ideally we bring somebody along from the community that's been getting training and running the business we stop patronizing the carry out, and when and then we help to place somebody from the community to replace it with some food, another food place, so that we stop going to the carry out. That carry out ends up leaving, and then there's a black business in place. And because we're organized, we are able to have those face-to-face conversations to break the mentality of self-hatred on why you need to support this black business rather than this other business that doesn't contribute to the community. And so, like, at the end of the day, it really just comes down to reach. Being able to confront, just like, I want white folks to confront their racist white family members. We have to confront the self-hatred black folks that's out here, right? Because if we allow, like, the reason why we've gotten to the point where, or one of the reasons why we've gotten to the point to where things seem so hard is because self-hatred has festered. It's made a home in our communities and it's gone unaddressed. And so now we have to get tough with that self-hatred shit. It's not even necessarily getting tough with the person, it's getting tough with that conditioning, right? And because, you know, like a lot of times we say hateful things and don't even truly realize like we're kind of saying it against one another. And of course we all need to be able to be held accountable. But man, like we really got to address the self-hatred in us. We got to man up with that. We got to look that in the face. And honestly, like my generation probably won't see the promised land like we envision it. But at the end of the day, I was having a conversation with someone earlier today. We have to be willing to sacrifice this shit. Like we might get killed out here doing this work, but you know what? Like my son, his grandson, granddaughter, like it needs to be a different world for them. And I think that, you know, we just have to get comfortable with the idea of sacrifice. Like we just really, for us, before we are actually put into that scenario and not asking for it, because, you know, it's just like, hey, you need to humble yourself before life does it for you. It's the same thing, because when life comes through and humbles, you're not going to like it. So like, it's best that like we take heed and try to do what we can as far as addressing this self-hatred, figuring it out in each other, because honestly, like people have to see their value. They have to see value in supporting that Black business up the block. And then if that happens, that allows another Black business to come in with something that doesn't compete with that business. And then we can build Black Wall Street all over again. And so like, I don't think we should even talk about Black Wall Street like it's a thing of the past. Like, honestly, if you ride through certain communities, Black Wall Streets are still there. We just haven't labeled it as Black Wall Street. There are still thriving Black communities. We just don't really talk about them that much, right? And so, like, I think that in the process of envisioning and working towards something, we must remember all of this stuff is not gone. A lot of this stuff still exists, right? It just wasn't labeled. It wasn't labeled Black Wall Street. And Tulsa, Oklahoma wasn't the only one with the Black Wall Street.
Right.
You know? And when you got a city full of Black folks like Baltimore, man, F Black Wall Street, like, what about just Black? This whole thing is just Black. We can, like, Black Wall Street, aiming for a Black Wall Street might be a little less ambitious with 60+ % Black people. You know what I'm saying? We should have most of the city, honestly, right? But, you know, they traffic dope and guns in here for that exact reason. They traffic dope and guns in here for that exact reason, to keep the division, you know?
Well, we hear a lot of the ills, but I want to hear some solution, brothers. Baltimore needs solutions. And what I hear from you guys involves a collective. You got to have a strategium. You got to have a place to build outside of virtual spaces. You have to coalesce, have alliances amongst each other. I'm looking at all my brothers here. We got Ray, TJ, Brandon, Adam. I see all of you guys. John, do you guys talk on a regular basis? How are we going to coalesce? The box, are we going to come together and build that? We talk about what we need, but can we actually do it? Or are we actually going to do it? Because it does take sacrifice, but it takes also us coming together and being intentional about sacrifice. So I want to hear from that, guys. Let me hear some solutions and what we're going to do with that. I want to start with you, Ray. I want to hear solutions and moving on.
So overall, I'll say yes, we do converse, and we do come together when it's time to go to Annapolis and things of that nature, where now it has to be opening those tables up to the communities, where we've been in the room together 100 times, but we need to get all of us into the rooms with the people that are actually trying to make this happen. And then there's another thing where we have to make sure that everyone recognizes what role an individual has in processes, where it's kind of peculiar. Because I had an elected official kind of say that they doubt my sincerity these days because I haven't been to Annapolis in the past 2 years. to fight against policies. But really, in Baltimore City, my role holds a federal appointment where I can't really do that anymore. I do have implied influence. And I think a collaborative one has to start with that strategy where we figure out who fills what component to get the greater thing done. And that becomes an important piece. And when you're dealing in these organizational structures, there's always this piece of, is it ego, is it competition, is it funding, where I think, to Adam's point, we gotta have to kind of build that infrastructure so we can actually sustain each other in the work that we're already doing that contributes to the broader systemic change.
Okay. I hear that. All right, TJ, jump in there.
I think that everyone plays their role, and I don't think that it's anyone's position to put down another person's position of what they're working on or trying to work through. Again, I think that there's a lot of agreement as to what direction that we know we need to go, what some of the issues are and that need to be addressed. And there are different people who focus specifically on that, and that's necessary. But really, I think one of the very first comments that was made, and as this conversation began, is accountability. And it's accountability and follow-up of where are we. I'll use it for instance. I actually did an interview, I think yesterday or the day before, on the police departments. They put out a 1-year look at the crime plan or what have you, but then they hashed out the last 6 months or what have you. And I said, well, where's the city's 1-year version of this? We need to see what they've done, because if we're once again putting the mindset that the problems that we have in the city are going to be solved through the police department's 1-year, strategic plan look back, then that's going to just perpetuate the problems we have. Where's the city's involvement of what they've done over the last year to improve the conditions in the community? So I believe accountability is a strong part of that, and being able to monitor and evaluate and adjust where grant funds are going, where resources are going, and what's happening. And that is, I think, really the key part, because with accountability, you at least have a group and a collective that understands what's happening versus it was done under the cover of darkness, and now here we are a year later or a new election cycle later, and we're arguing about the same things and there's been no progress. So we can't let just the sexy moment be the moment. The issues exist. And I think, it was Adam who brought up earlier, the food insecurity issues that exist, they've been existing. Again, we've had this moment of COVID that's exposed these things. So a year from now, let's just say we get a cure for COVID goes away a year or two from now. If the food insecurity issues still exist in those same neighborhoods, what really have we done, and what really did we learn, and where is the accountability to address those specific issues? So getting together to do that, but continuing for each of us in our own way, using our quote influence for advocacy is what has to happen to draw more and more people in, to get more and more people involved, to understand how their voice can be used for power.
Okay. Brandon, you want to jump in there? And
yes, excuse me. I had read an article before, and it was talking about the difference between a group and a great group. And it was saying that great groups put a dent in the universe. So that's what makes them extraordinary versus ordinary. And what that just means is that, you want to have different groups of individuals, different men, that's doing different things around the city. But when you look at the human body, right, the arm don't say he's better than the head. or the leg don't say he's better than the toe. You know, like the human body works for the preservation of that body, and everything works together as a unit. And so I just think that that's where we gotta be. So for me personally, because I'm the new guy, you know, people saying, "Who is this guy?" I'm the new guy. But for me, like, so my goal is to just begin learning who these different men is. You know, like I was in prison watching TJ on the news. You feel me? Now I'm on a Zoom with him. So that's just, you know, and I always watch, you know, I mean, and I didn't never develop an opinion of him one way or the other, but I just always watch. He's a black man on TV. You feel me? In the police force. So I'm just saying like that. So for me, like, yeah, that's where it's at, forging bonds and begin teaching, like, don't pass judgment on the individual based on what you know, because you don't know a person, like you said, like you don't know a person. So we begin passing judgments based off of what we think, and it don't necessarily be real. It be just what we see. So we gotta really just start, like I say, just uniting, like not allowing our ego, like that's because like, we be ego tripping. Like even like, you know, in the streets, you know, people, you know, like they, you know, they be ego tripping, you know, but even in the political, the social, whatever you want to, like, we be having our egos. So we really gotta, you know, just, and I might not see things how you see it. I might not necessarily believe how you believe, but at the end of the day, I want our people to be in a better condition. I want our youth to stop dying and going to jail. I want them to stop believing that, like, yeah, guns and drugs, that's the order of the day. So we agree on that. So let's just unite on that principle and begin working to help eradicate that. How we can eradicate it? Like we say, one life at a time. That's what it is. Like, because it comes from an attitude. Because the attitude was black people are nothing. Then it came to a belief. Then it turned into a law. You feel me? Because the law was that we was 3/5 of a man. Just giving a history lesson real quick. So that attitude is in us now. Today, our youth. I ain't nothing. Let's start with the attitude. It is what it is. Right? Then we developed that belief. Then it turned into an unwritten law in the streets that, yeah, all we supposed to do is die and go to prison. So I just think that me personally moving forward, I want to begin building a working relationship with these men so I can know what's going on around the city. Because I truly care about the conditions of Baltimore City. So I want to know what's going on. So, you know, that's what I'm going to do moving forward. Just network with these brothers that's on this call. So thank you.
Love it, love it. All right, Brother Adam, come on.
Yeah, so you know, in the spirit of what the brothers been saying, you know, part of my inspiration for why, you know, I don't really get too discouraged when we're talking about what to do for all the things that are, you know, hurting our community is that I feel like I'm surrounded around a bunch of black people that are doing work in our community every day. And when people say like, you know, we can't solve the issues or, you know, how are we going to do it? It's like, well, people, it's a verb. Like people are doing it at the moment. The question is how much we can build on that momentum and get the resources to build out that momentum over a period of time. You know, 5 years ago during the Baltimore uprising, people were talking about, oh, man, this ain't nothing going to change. But there's so much stuff that's been happening in the background that I think we won't see the payoff until much later, because a lot of it is infrastructure. Like structural problems require structural approaches. And so I believe when you're working on structure and systems, that you won't really see the results until much later. And so I just feel really confident, especially with the brothers on this call, that there's going to be that Baltimore is not going to end up like DC or a lot of the other places, because the people that live here are not going to allow that to happen. And I think that even in spite of all the, you know, the different tactics and tools that white supremacy has thrown our way, you know, internalized inferiority and all the incentives we have to kill each other and destroy each other, I just firmly believe in the power of our community. That I believe that we, at the end of the day, will protect each other when it comes down to it. I just think we have to be supportive of the black people in our community and the institutions in our community that are doing that. And I think, you know, I feel like most of the time I'm a broken record amongst my peers, because we spend a whole lot of time. a lot of us spend a whole lot of time saying, you know, you keep talking about how I'm going to do this. It's like, well, there's no I here. There's no me. It's the collective. It's the community. Like, how are we going to change our material conditions? And I'm just confident it's going to happen. And I think that if there's Black people that feel despair, that the more time they spend around Black people that are doing work as opposed to Negroes that aren't doing shit, then they'll feel better about what's happening in Baltimore too.
Real talk. All right, John P. Comer.
I'm a willing man, you know. I'm willing to work with our people to get where we need to go. I mean, I don't have much more words than that. I'm really not big on talking. That's why I get excited when I start talking about this stuff. But I mean, I'm ready to turn that corner, you know. And I think I've met enough Black men and Black women in Baltimore that can do it. And I think everything has been said that I can say on this call. So, you know, echo everything. One love to everyone. And I'm willing and ready to work with anyone that's about, you know, Black progress, Black pride, Black power.
All right. And John, when it comes to Architects of Justice, can you tell us a little bit about where you are in the city and where you guys work out of?
I'm in Cherry Hill, I'm in Cherry Hill pretty much. So, you know, we right across the street on Carver, Roundview and Carver. So, you know, we're here every day. There's the Rich program down here, Raised in Cherry Hill, Mike Battle. There's Black Year Institute with the brother Eric. There's Elevate, that's working in schools, and myself. So some good work going on from this building. But, you know,
you guys doing some good work in Cherry Hill. That's an area they're looking to gentrify. So you gotta work down there. That's near that water.
Yeah.
That's right off of the city. You know they want Cherry Hill going to be Strawberry Hill if you don't watch it, bro.
Nah, it's coming, and we can. The thing is, you can suspect it. I don't want to start talking again, but you can suspect it. Nearly everywhere there's public housing.
Yep.
You know, Gilmore Homes, they're coming for it. McCullough Homes, they're coming for it.
Wow.
Cherry Hill, they're coming for it. You know, Perkins Homes, they're coming for it. Like, you know, it doesn't take much to see, and you can't really believe what they're saying about the plans for those places. Never believe it. They use the same model in every city. They tell the people they're going to be able to come back once they tear it down. Nope. It's not happening.
So the projects is really a project.
Without a doubt.
Without a doubt.
And they need to be torn down, but they need to be replaced with adequate housing and give opportunity to the folks that live there. That's all.
That's it. Brother Cleo, take us out.
Well, I am, regardless of what I've seen in my over half century of witnessing things, I'm encouraged, I'm committed. I'm going to die advocating for transforming, empowering Black folks and trying to create a new tomorrow and get past step one to other places for Black people. That's the way it is. No matter what happens, that's just the way it is for me, and it's the way it's always going to be. I'm going to be an asset to Black people, period. How I behave, what I do, my decisions, my imagination, my activity, my profession, my commitment is to the advancement of Black people, period. That's going to continue. When it comes to the solutions that I believe in, I've already spoken to the fact that we have to unlearn the myth of white supremacy and the myth of Black inferiority, and that needs to be a curriculum that's simultaneously in place to everything else that we do. And Comer kind of affirmed that when he talked about the self-hate that we're dealing with and how, my paraphrase that is intergenerational, it's a paralyzing, asphyxiating norm that until we take a look at it and learn to unpack it, recognize it, decode it, and deflect it, we're going to keep relapsing back into the state of cynicism with leaders doing whatever they can to help, but being isolated as opposed to a collective leadership. of us as a community working as a collective to advance ourselves. When it comes into more microscopic details of strategies, I only do that in private spaces with Black people, because white people are laying in wait to compromise anything that's a great idea for our community. So I don't talk about solutions in great detail in mixed company. And I don't mean mixed in terms of the people who are on this particular call, but who's watching this call. Mm-hmm. Because we know about Marcus Garvey, we know about other Black people who have built things, and white supremacists confuse Black people, which is not a difficult species in the United States. Confused Black people is not a difficult species of human being in the United States. I want to emphasize that. It's easy to find somebody confused, somebody who believe that white water is wetter and white fire is hotter, and that people who look more like Jesus looks are better than everybody else, who are unconsciously involved in an anti-Black campaign sent into the work by somebody white, which is why we have all these fake leaders that keep coming up and who keep being lifted up because the people that sent them in know they're going to keep us down. So knowing that that's a real phenomenon that we have to contend with, I don't get into the solution area in detail. Now, as we're in a face-to-face room, and we've committed to do some work for Black people, and we committed to collectively strategize on behalf of these things that we're talking about while doing some Black self-conceptual repair work. Because from a self-conceptual perspective, a lot of us don't like ourselves, and it's unconscious. It's not conscious, it's unconscious. We don't realize it. And we have not addressed it for so many generations. We have mistaken Black dysfunction for culture. For that's what Black people do. We have to unlearn those negative expectations simultaneously to the other great work we're doing. But similar to Adam, I also am encouraged because I also surround myself with Black folks who are doing something, and the ones who are around me too long who are not doing something, I train them how to do something. And I develop new leadership so young Black people can have a whole nother trajectory around their possibilities and the work they must do to help Black people. And I'm proud to say that I've been able to work with a number of young people who went from anti-Black to pro-Black soldiers, and not just rhetorical soldiers, but who are putting in the work and who are doing things. So I'll close by saying that development of our youth, that training and that affirmation and guidance of our youth, and teaching them to decode and unlearn anti-Black norms and decode the sources in the culture that teaches us that needs to be part of our work. We got to bring young people with us. One of the problems I have with some of our most known leaders, I'm not saying no names, but some of them are 90 years old, is that we don't see who they've trained. And there's so many of us who have a fear of irrelevance that we can't pass the mic. And we got to learn to pass the mic and create new leaders so we can have vibrance in youth in the soldier position throughout our whole experience in this country so we can win. And my goal is to be in part of the winning team. And I'm here to help make that happen.
Love it. That's powerful. That's powerful. So Brandon, tell us about your business, because we're going to close this out. So we also want to reiterate your business again. So if there's people who need your services, give it to us.
Thank you. So my company is Jumpstart Cleaning Service. We do residential, we do commercial, COVID-19 cleaning, carpet cleaning, move out, move in. We operate in basically like a 25-mile radius. But I will come, we just have to make other arrangements. But we're growing, we're gaining more commercial contracts, as the day goes on. So that's just a blessing, man. I'm just diligent, just trying to network. And just like I say, grow the business. And I also have a delivery service that I'm courier service as far as Amazon is concerned, that I'm in the process of just securing a contract. So, I'm working. I want to become a viable businessman in this city, and just see what the world has to offer. Thank you for having me.
Well, I'm really impressed after you said you had a 16-year stint and for you to come out, and you've been out for 2 years and you have a business, you're working, you're going forward in this community, and you're helping others. I got to commend you on that. And that's what we have to do.
So I had a question for you, brother. Is Jumpstart Cleaning Services LLC on Facebook?
Yes, sir. Yep, that's me.
Okay. Someone yesterday asked me if they were looking for a Black-owned cleaning business, so I'm trying to get a referral.
Black Box gets 3%. Let me tell you, Black Box gets 3% of that contract. You gotta feed the Black community. Remember, that's what we're talking about. Feed the Black community.
Circulate.
Yeah, we circulate the money. So guys, I want to say TJ, Brandon, John, Adam, Ray Kelly, Dr. Cleo, Black Box Radio just thanks you guys for your genius, for your input. We all want to see Baltimore flourish. It was so important for me to get the men's like lens, because of course I'm a woman, and it's a lot of men who need to hear from men, and hear from some of the men in the community actually activating and doing things that's outside of their own families for the betterment of all of us. So I appreciate you guys' voice tonight. I definitely appreciate some of the things that you brought forth. I did some notes, and I hope that we all can stay together. I think, and I'm going to put in when we actually post this, I'm going to put information for everyone, because we should stay in touch. This is something that we need to build alliances, and we can't always talk on Zoom, but we will link up and come together, because really Baltimore has a lot of amazing grassroots and amazing talent that is all working in their own little island. And we need to bring this together and be more powerful in a more unified manner. So I say thank you to everyone. And anybody got any last words they want to put down? Anybody want to sing us out, rap us out?
Well, I just wanted to really quickly say, very proud of you, Brandon, because your starting point was probably a little bit behind some of us. Yeah. And to come out fighting like you are is a testament, and your story has to be told and shared. While I was on this call, one of the people I used to work with, actually supervised, sent me a text message of a guy that we used to arrest as a juvenile and then later as an adult, over and over again. Problem. And he sent me the text message of this young man's book that he wrote. After being shot a couple of times, he's turned the corner. And I was actually messaging with the individual while we were on the call, telling him how proud I was. And he thanked me for kicking his butt. Not literally, I don't want y'all going back trying to get me, but kicking his butt for trying to help him get on the straight and narrow. And people do it in their time. Yes. But that's where we have to understand that police aren't the judge, jury, and executioners. We have to see what someone can become. And some people need time to become that. And just a big shout out to you, and certainly all the people on this. And thank you, Queen, for putting it on and allowing me to be part of this group of hardworking in the streets guys who've done 1,000 times more work than I've ever done. And I appreciate being a piece of that. So look forward to the future. Yeah, we needed your political lens. So I wanted to bring you into that. And, Ray I ain't no politician, though. Yeah, the politician. And then, Ray is out here, but Ray had some tough times at the beginning, and he's fighting for the community. So a lot of that's going on. You know what I mean, Ray?
And I think we have to continue to champion brothers like Brandon, because I can remember, so I've been home now for 13 years, and I feel like that's an important component of me staying visible and standing out there on Pennsylvania Avenue doing productive and constructive things. Is those guys remember me. You stood out there with me and Twan. You see, this is where we did our worst stuff. Yeah. And those guys see now that not only is change possible for people in our situation, but really we can flourish, and there is no limit on where we can go.
Yep. Yeah. And that's why it's important for grassroots. A lot of time the grassroots community is people who've actually been a pariah one time in the community. And they come, that's why you don't throw people away. They can come back and be the light of the community. And so in Baltimore, we have a lot of that. And then we have a lot of young thunder. We got, Brother Adam, and John, and we got Brother Cleo in the city.
Old thunder, right?
Yeah, we got some old thunder and light. But not only that, your tutelage and what you can teach us and the behavioral aspects of it. You're here in Baltimore City. We need these tools. These are incredible tools. And so as a woman, I feel safe around you Black men. I really do. And that's really what Black women want. We want to feel safe around our men. And I feel safe around you guys. And I know that if we keep this up and we coalesce and we keep these alliances going, we're going to change the city. And we're going to have a place where our children and everyone's going to be safe. So listen, we're going to stay linked up. I appreciate you guys. I'm humbly grateful for your appearance tonight. From Black Box Radio, I say thank you. Everybody, good night.
Thank you.
I love when you have so many voices. I think it is the best part of these type of panels is hearing so many perspectives. And so I really enjoy this talk, Brother Cleo. What you think?
Like I told you in one of our previous conversations, I have been involved in a gazillion conversations, a gazillion.
Yes.
I'll make a calculator that counts the number high enough for the conversations I've had. Mm-hmm. And I'm involved in this conversation for you, frankly.
I want to make a comment because you were coming for her sign pretty hard. Like, you see the sign over Queen's shoulder? Can you see Queen's shoulder? Oh, yeah. I don't know. You can't even see Queen.
I tried to ignore that.
Y'all can't see all of this chocolate over here.
We talk about
we see teeth. We see teeth in that Black Lives Matter sign that everybody came for tonight.
All you see is my teeth.
Teeth and Black Lives Matter on the sign. I was like, oh, get him. Oh, get him. Like,
yeah, he came for Black Lives Matter, but he's right. They only show up.
Yeah, I mean, they sit right on your shoulder.
They my sisters, but they not present for the micro issues. They're macroly present, and they're not really present because they're now bigger than the real work, I think. But anyway, we're not talking about them. We're talking
on
about
your shoulders. They're in the building because it's like, line of sight.
Yeah, that's true. But this is Black Lives. I mean, this is not Black Lives. This is Baltimore. Look at me, went right back. This is Baltimore, and we had some great men tonight, who are doing a lot of work in the city. And I feel encouraged. Well, we got to bring this into a alliance and really talk real talk. You know what I'm saying, Brother Monago?
Yeah, I don't want to interrupt Gigi. He seems to be trying to get a point across.
Yeah, I think the real value wasn't even so much for, it's great that there are people who have been connected and are aware of each other. The real value is, I think, that people who were listening learned some things. Just listening to the way that different people are operating within the city and raising the awareness and planting a seed of hope and possibility in people who don't see it. The way that a lot of times, it can be discouraging when you don't feel like change is happening. So when you see people engaged in change, just the fact that you see that possibility in action through other people, it can be powerful. And a lot of times when you are really engaged in a lot of work yourself and you do it every day, it's like, okay, we talking again. We're saying I've said this before and I've heard this before. There are a lot of people who this might be their first time hearing some of these perspectives. And I think there were a lot of really valuable things said on that level. And I can relate to places that different people are just by virtue of the different types of work that I've been involved with over the years. I could see myself in a lot of the challenges that people were expressing in the work and the frustrations and, just the visibility in the community. So, you know, I enjoyed being able to listen and kind of take the conversation in from my point of view. So.
And that's what I want Brother Cleo to understand. He does it so much because, you know, being Black and right now he's really sexy. So people are calling on him a lot. And I get it. But what Black Box Radio's function in Baltimore City is to infotainment. We want to inform and entertain at the same time. Entertainment, we don't always have to be shaken to be entertained. And information can be it can be entertaining, but it definitely can change your life. And so when I have you on, Brother Cleo, it's not just for me but it's for the people, because a lot of what you're saying, a lot of these folks have never been exposed to. Every time when you finish talking, someone says to me, who is this guy? Like, you just showed up yesterday. You know, like you haven't had that hat on in 40 shows this week. You know what I mean?
Hey,
you still
can't get that bit. They still your guy. You can't get to your guy.
I think enough. Like I saw his light on the other day, so I might have to tip it there to see what's going on. But
so yeah. You know, part of what we're doing in Baltimore is trying to just pull that cap off. You know, I see it's a lot of lack of information here. A lot of lack of access to the information also.
Well, I think I get it. You know, I really think I get what Black Box is doing. I mean, having spoken with you and been on your show and seen interviews, etc. And I really appreciate what's his name, Brandon?
Yeah, Brandon.
I really thought what he had to say was powerful.
Yes.
His personal story is powerful.
Yep.
And the brother that began the affirmation of him, that was very, very powerful, because people are trained that people like him ain't about nothing and ain't gonna be about nothing. And he totally defies that, and he can address issues. So I would like to see him do more public speaking and tell his story, but he don't just tell a subjective personal story. He has some level of political analysis.
Yep.
And that has to happen alongside these personal stories, because a lot of Black people, quote unquote, make it, but like the people said at one of the HBCUs that I worked at, this guy who had been you might have heard me say this before, this guy who had been a professor at this very well-known HBCU for almost 30 years, he said, we produce great Black professors or Black students, but we don't necessarily produce soldiers for Black people. You know, people who are going to when they get their careers and their degrees, going to invest in Black people when they get their gig. They just be gone to get their Mercedes and they gone. And I told him, I said, you know, why don't we take advantage, like white folks take advantage of Yale? That's where George Bush, you know, his people come from. Yep. They're making soldiers for white supremacy, and it's part of a strategy. How come you can't use this academic context to make sure that you invest in Black students in ways that make them care about Black life as part of their norms? I mean, for example, a lot of Black student unions don't have strong alumni reinvestment.
Nope.
Because they have not been trained while they're there to value Black people.
That's true.
So we had this conversation, and he agreed, but he was uncomfortable. And we had a private conversation later, because like Mr. Comer said, a lot of their money come from white folks, and they don't want to offend them.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I want to start having conversations privately about strategy, because I don't know if many FBI agents are here right now, but I run a nonprofit.
Yeah, but Zoom is not the place for strategism. This is for us to connect, not to.
Right. I'm just saying that you can do Black affirming, strategic, successful work through the nonprofit machine.
Yep.
But you have to know how to do it, and you have to be very, 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 very strategic and intentional. And I am very strategic and intentional and manage dollars that come from the federal government and other kind of places, because I'm very strategic and intentional. So it can be done.
It can be done. Okay.
But it can't be done if you have no imagination or blah, blah, blah. But anyway, I see the value of it. And I'm just admitting to having had a gazillion conversations.
Well, I appreciate you coming on in Baltimore City. I mean, because so many people don't even know that a giant like you is here to even utilize your tools. You know, they just don't know. They're not even, they have no vision of the leaders we have in the city. And we think, you know, we hear of violence, we hear of chaos, we hear of decay. Everything about Baltimore when it comes out is something that should be on a show. Nobody talks about the work, you know, the art, some great schools in this city, by white people's standards, the Hopkins and the Micah. I mean, we're talking, you know, even by some of the oldest HBCU as Morgan State, 1867. We're talking about long-term things in Baltimore City. Harriet Tubman, the church with the Underground Railroad. Baltimore has a hell of a legacy that no one speaks about because of the decay, the violence, and all of the stuff that has been engineered for the conversation. That's engineered conversation. But the greatness of what Baltimore has, and Pennsylvania Avenue used to be the hub of Black entertainment in the world. In this country. I mean, this is what is in Baltimore that has been systematically dismantled, destroyed, attacked. All of this, as you mentioned, the Arch Social Club on that corner. That is a historical district that they allow a methadone clinic under. We're across the street from a library. So you have all of these systematic movements you put in communities, and you tear them down, and you tear the people down, and you blame the people. And that's what's happening in Baltimore. And I can't say who's doing it, but I'm seeing the outcomes, and it isn't from the people. It's coming from power. Power has the resources to do what we see. So when we have these conversations, Brother Cleo, it's for the people who don't recognize the layers that make up what we're living in. We think that all of a sudden Black people just don't want to work. They just drug addicts. No, that's not. No. We got to talk about what happened to get us here.
Yes, we do.
You know, and that's why we're having these conversations so the community can start loving on themselves and understand that they can make mistakes, but we can come back. Everybody has a Brandon. Trust me, everybody's been Brandon. They might do a 16-year bid because they didn't get caught, but everybody has that story. And the redemption of the story is that brother is out here fighting. You know, I met him fighting, you know, in the street on Monday. So, you know, that is why we do this. So, Brother Cleo, listen, I appreciate you. You're my mentor anyway, so you don't have a choice. You can't say no. You got to do it. I don't know really what you're talking about. And you know what? As I'm looking at my picture, guys, you know I work out in the sun. I think I got a golden tan. What y'all think? I think it's that.
That's not the way it's coming across on my end. It's just it's just shadows. Like, it's all good. I'm just letting you know.
It's not coming across to you like a golden brown.
No, it's just dark. It's just dark, and it's hard to see your face. I mean, I'm just telling you what it is. But you'll see. I told you. I texted you.
Brother Cleo, that's why I need you, because this black man right here.
No, I'm just letting you know when you get the video, and I got to put you in Photoshop so people to know you're there.
But Brother Cleo said he can see my teeth.
I can see your teeth in that Black Lives Matters.
Okay. As long as you can see my teeth, I mean, my mother did the right thing. She took care of my teeth. So, but I don't know what's wrong with the light, and I'm going to fix that by the next one. But listen, this has been an excellent talk. Brother Cleo, you want to say anything while we roll out of here?
Good night.
He's like, I said enough. I mean, I've been talking for 2 hours. What else you want me to say?
That's what he's saying. You know, I get it. You know me, I haven't been talking for 2 hours. So, but anyway.
Right, I could tell as soon as you got to going, like, now's my chance. It's like, now, you know, you've been holding that the whole time.
I was glad to meet and hear Mr. Comer.
He's a bad guy.
Like this. We were like very.
I saw your head. I said, wow, that hat might fall off. Because I saw your head. You was happy for him. So yeah, Adam, they just some powerful guys. Just powerful guys. All right, G.
All right. Thanks for everyone for listening, and we really appreciate everyone for spending time with us this evening. You can catch this entire conversation if you came in late or you missed it or you checking it out. You can find this and all of the great content we're putting together at blackboxradio.com. That's BLakBoxxRadio. Make sure that you subscribe so that you don't miss a single thing that we are putting down for you.
Absolutely. All right, Queen from Black Box Radio, Dr. Cleo Manago, the Amasi Center for Wellness.
For Black Wellness and Culture.
Black Wellness and Culture. Get it
The
right.
Amasi Center for Black Wellness and Culture. You can find us at amaasi.org. Amasi.org.
Amasi.org. Check that brother out. He's powerful. On behalf of Black Box Radio, we out.
All right, y'all.
Deuces.
Good night, and thanks for the invitation.
All right.